architectural and urban projects to define new scenarios for a sustainable future for the city of Buenos Aires. A study case of social housing. Argentina is a country immersed for more than 20 years now in a permanent state of economic crisis that seems to take on an endemic connotation and also seems to be only partially affected by the Latin American architectural renaissance, which in Colombia or Chile, for example, appears more dynamic. This is a scene that has never been so present to the world's interest since the time of the generation of architects such as Oscar Niemeyer, Clorindo Testa, and Luis Barragan. Argentina has a population of around 44 million people, residing mainly in urban areas, first and foremost the autonomous city of Buenos Aires, which, in the metropolitan area alone, is home to more than a third of the population of the whole Argentina, but on an area that does not reach 1% of the country's total surface area. The issue of social housing in Latin America is a problem that has become increasingly important over the years, prompting professional politicians and researchers from different disciplines, such as the social science, architecture, and urban planning, to formulate hypotheses to try to mitigate the phenomenon of VIJAs, urban settlements formed mainly by shacks built with waste materials and refuse, which, unlike the better-known Brazilian favelas, do not develop on the outskirts of cities, but rather close to the urban center. Particularly relevant among the Latin American experiments in the field of social housing is the experience conducted by the Elemental group of architects founded by Alejandro Aravena, which focuses on the idea of the vivienda incremental, a basic structure that can be redesigned and improved over time, but which offers the minimum habitable residential unit from the outset. If money can only pay for about 40 square meters, instead of thinking of that size as a small house, why don't we consider it half of a good house? This is a question by Aravena. Elemental become an interesting case study the moment we extrapolate its essence as a documentary, an operational synthesis text that brings together an experience of a design process aimed at improving the quality of social housing, starting from the individual building and reaching the scale of the entire city. The lesson of Aravena teaches us can also be reproposed in the Argentinian context, opening up to the possibility of a bottom-up approach in a reality dominated by public policies that too often forgot to involve the population in their processes. Returning to the Argentinian context, an important passage that has defined the current image of social housing neighborhoods refers to the 1970s, when the main settlement typology was the mega juntos habitacionales, huge residential complex resulting from a collaboration between the public administration and some private actors. It is important to remember how on mass residence one of the most important forces of city growth is exerted: speculation. These highly speculative operations have generated in the center of the city of Buenos Aires a series of mega housing complexes that, denying the logic of the grid, become elements disconnected from the urban and social dynamics, marginalizing the thousands of people living in these areas. Today, a demolition principle could perhaps be envisaged for those complexes as the only lifeline for the resident, as the quality of life is increasingly approaching the very low condition we found inside the villas. Going into specific of current public policies in the field of construction, the Argentine Ministry of Territorial Development has promoted for a 3 years period from 21 to 23 a series of initiatives that are developed starting from 4 reference guidelines. One owes to provide credit to citizens for the autonomous construction of new single houses. The second is procrear, to favor the construction of new residential neighborhoods, generating mortgage credits and thus making the purchase of new apartments more accessible. The third is the National Urban Land Plan, to create new complete lots of all the services necessary to allow citizens to build your home. And finally, the third, called Reconstruct Program, which aims at the recovery and reuse of existing buildings that are in a state of abandonment. An extensive social development program, the largest ever carried out by the Argentinian government. A strategic urban and environmental development project interacting public and private sectors, also starting to involve local communities in the definition of new methodologies for social housing. From an initial phase of an analysis of the above-mentioned public processes, a number of criticalities emerge, which we would like to attempt to mitigate also through the launch of a research project to try to provide a significant contribution that innovates social housing practices. The design of public space and public buildings today becomes the place to discuss new social balances, triggering the emergence of new communities and new models of citizenship, outlining the futures of new paradigm of contemporary living in Buenos Aires. Starting from these traces, a research agreement has been initiated involving the Università de Morón, Escuela Superior de Arquitectura y Diseño in Buenos Aires, and the University of Udine, Polytechnic Department of Engineering and Architecture in the northeast of Italy. The aim is to develop useful tools at the design and compositional level to better understand the urban and architectural dynamics of the Argentinian territory, and at the same time to stimulate and orientate ideas of intervention, redevelopment and modification that can, to all intents and purposes, represent a long-term work for the governance of the city and architecture of Buenos Aires. In an attempt to pursue this objective, it was decided to apply the methodology of the intensive design workshop, which saw a number of Italian and Argentinian students collaborating in the physical space of the Università de Morón building in Buenos Aires, coordinating by lectures, researchers, and tutors from the two universities involved, the one from Italy and the one from Buenos Aires. These practices, which are recurrent in our university, constitute moments of collective sharing and growth, both for the exchange and immersive experience in other cultures, as well as for the architectural routes and the interviewing of new networks that are woven from this journey and end up proposing new directions. This applied research experience focused on the case study of El Palomar, is a social housing site currently under construction located in the urban context of the autonomous province of Buenos Aires, specifically in the municipality of Morón, close to a green area now transformed into a nature reserve under reclamation. This is a space that has great potential if we consider the high level of settlement density that characterize metropolises such as Buenos Aires, and since in the presence of a green belt, a green reserve that offer the possibility of creating residences in contact with the natural environment. After a first phase of analysis and study at a territorial and urban level, the papers produced during the workshop take shape in the form of a project master plan, where through a series of maps and project drawings, the reasoning and the thesis formulated during the days of work and narrated with the ultimate aim of highlighting the criticalities and strengths of the case study analyzed. What emerged is a project that seeks to mitigate the rigidity and limitation of the top-down practice proposed by the Argentinian government by reinterpreting them through the filter of sustainability and starting from the assumption that territorial and environment planning can make a contribution to social equity by favoring the elimination of social divisions and inequalities. We therefore wonder in that way and with that what contribution, from the point of view of scientific research and architectural design, there can be improvements in the methodologies used in Argentinian, starting from the various experience of participatory design maturated in Italy, with a view to modifying the living conditions of the inhabitants within the city, particularly in the urban context of Buenos Aires. Going behind the punctual project outcomes that the workshop produced, it may be of interest to draw attention to the critical issues that the comparison with the European approach revealed with respect to the Argentinian design methods. First of all, the obsolescence of some initiatives emerged, and is precisely the comparison between Italian and Latin American students that has made it possible to attempt to propose the transition to a new way of doing participatory architecture, a practice that is not widespread in this context, and that should certainly be increased in Argentinian context. The envelopment of the population, the future inhabitants of the planet spaces, was one of the points on which an important part of the reflection focused, in an attempt to bring out the positive contribution that such practices can offer to public administration, even in the governance of the territory. The Argentinian vision does not envisage as a widespread practice the involvement of factors other than the technical offices of the municipalities, even with regard to the architectural design of the buildings themselves, which is carried out in most cases by the offices of the municipality, without recourse to external tenders or invitation to tender, like in Europe we do. This type of approach severely limits the possibility of receiving external inputs from architects and urban planners in designing a new image for the city, and is totally at the odds with European practices, where instead the choice of a public call for design becomes a regulatory requirement. Another innovative aspect concerns the choice of introducing certain themes such as recovery, reuse, and refunctionalization, phenomena typical of urban regeneration in the European context, which are, however, extraneous and innovative in a reference context such as that of the city of Buenos Aires, where the large amount of land available makes the need to initiate, in a such context, the multiple indications provided at world level by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. First and foremost, the reduction of soil consumption to zero by 2050. seem less pressing. The development plans proposed by the Argentinian government seems to almost completely ignore this indication, as evidenced by the fact that there were no decisions towards solid day in Argentina. The different moments of concentration that followed during the working sessions, allowed the Argentinian participants to draw on innovative concepts expressed in some research projects in the architectural and urban sphere in Italy, also opening their eyes to design practices involving the introduction of new architectural elements within the pre-existing buildings and urban structures. Now we talk about the future scenarios from this experience. In the Argentinian context, obsolete practices still remain in use, far removed from the typical concept of urban and territorial regeneration to which we are accustomed in the European context. The vision towards waste and scrap has an extremely negative connotation in these territories, as it is associated with slums that make waste the raw material with which houses are built. It is difficult to arrange the stigma that even leftovers and waste can be ennobled and become the metrics for new quality residential building. A first step forward in subsidized construction in Argentina could take the form of reversing the current trend that incomparably encourages land consumption and subsidies the construction of new houses on a land that is not yet urbanized. This vision could become an excellent starting point for discussing the future development of Buenos Aires, focusing on regenerative practices that see the recovery of abandoned spaces and their use of waste as possible flexible practices, making the Reconstruir project a priority, which among current public policy for social housing represents the only design methodology that avoids land consumption in favor of more sustainable practices. At the same time, they encourage the birth and development of urban regeneration agencies, which in Italy have provided their usefulness through experience, becoming an indispensable tool of doing architecture applied to social housing. In order to pursue objectives of development and improvement of public processes of territorial and urban regeneration, university research has proved to be a decisive tool for the change of knowledge between academic realities that, despite having development in different environments, have been able to influence each other. The contribution of the Italian university has allowed past and present regulations and case study to be brought to light in the Argentinian context, which, with their experiences, can avoid repeating mistakes already made in the European context, accelerating also a process of improvement involving all processes related to the design of public space through sustainability practices and strategic visions.